I'm just going to sit here because I, for some reason, have a cold now. So I'm not going to make you sick. And usually I'm so much more dynamic, but I can't really speak. And I think I'm having problems with this mic because I have too many accessories on, but I'm going to try to work around that. I have been working at the World Bank this is my third year now. I'm an operations officer, which is I basically have a grant management portfolio that I deal with. And one of the reasons why I sort of changed up my objective of the program, of my discussion today, is because I want to really enable myself to speak to you more about what I do and talk to you a little bit about the enabling environment. And I guess I need this thing, huh? Okay, that's okay. So the basic thing I want to really try to relay is the context in which social efforts and innovations exist within the social sphere of the bank. So I'm going to try to approach this by giving a little bit of an introduction. I mean, I know people know what the bank is, but I do have a couple slides of the goal, the mission, and all that, but I'll get through that quickly. And then give you a little bit of information of how social came to the bank. So people may not know that history, but that'll be relatively brief. And then I wanted to approach the question of innovation through funding streams. And as many of you know, there are so many funding mechanisms and ways to get funding, lending, grants, whatever, in the bank. And so I'm going to approach the discussion on innovation based on the funding streams for which I have been engaged in. And then I'm going to end with challenges, which there are hundreds of. And I hope that you all help me in this conversation, because I think many of you have had even more experience with the World Bank than myself, and I know someone here who has worked for the bank in the past, so it'll be interesting to hear perspectives from that. Okay. So everybody knows Bretton Woods, 1944, Reconstruction. Just kind of starting there. The challenge, reducing global poverty and fighting poverty with passion. I don't even know how you measure passion, but that's what it is in regards to the mission. I really just wanted to show this for people to, if you didn't know how many various elements there are to the World Bank group, now you see them and how a little complex and complicated it all is. And the members, everybody votes, everybody has a say, and you can also see from this slide sort of the chronology of how things came about. So interesting environment, interesting place to work. It can also offer some challenges, which we'll get to at the end. The World Bank people use the World Bank group to reference all of those, but interchangeably with the World Bank, which is really just IBRD and IDA, which is some funding streams. So when people say the World Bank, they're really just referencing these lending and grant mechanisms. Okay, so to the point about social. So it all started in the 70s, really, and I guess the bank was really looking at it more in regards to project effectiveness. And so it wasn't until the mid-'80s and mid-'90s that they realized, oh, well, there may be some adverse effects to the things that we're doing in the field, and maybe we should be looking at it a little bit more. It took us a while, but we got there. So we find ourselves in the mid-'80s and '90s really coming up with some procedures and departments and networks to really address the social environment. And it was interesting that social really started in the environment department, which means that a lot of the social discussion was based on environmental issues and natural resources, which it still is a lot today. Okay, so 1995, we had the UN Summit on Social Development. It seems like the bank does everything after somebody talks about it. So then, in 1997, the Social Development Network comes to being. I think there's so many people there. There's over 10,000 people that work at the World Bank, and I know we've thought about it in the past, but for some reason this summit brought it to fruition. So now we had a social development network starting in 1997, which is relatively late to the scene, but we got there. The Sustainable Development Network is now the current iteration of where social development, which is the department that I work in, exists. So that was created in 2006 for the reasons that are stated here. And now there are 1,200 professional staff that work within that department and in these areas of agriculture, environment, infrastructure, and social development. I just highlight the different departments within sustainable development so you can see sort of the mixture of departments that work within that. And so of these 5 departments, there are directors and staff for those departments, and I highlight social because it's the best one in SDN, and I work for social development. And then also we have directors in all the 6 regions within the World Bank. All right, so within the Social Development Department, so I'm trying to get you all down to the little nitty-gritty here. The primary gist, we have a new director now, and he really wants to push the Social Development Department more towards the line of social sustainability and safeguards. And he is really interested in promoting these 5 areas here: conflict, crime, and violence, which also now holds sort of a youth window and gets to trying to bridge the gap with young people in the work that we're doing in social, which I'm really excited about, and I'm working on a program with that I'll mention later. And then community-driven development and local governance, which is the team that I work on, which is why it's highlighted. And but also, I also wanted to note in the things that are in parentheses, there are also departments within the bank, and PREM, I even had to write it down. The Poverty Reduction Economic Management Department also works in social. There are other departments that work on social issues, but the house for social is the Social Development Department and Sustainable Development Network. I know that's a little confusing, but I tried. We also have an Indigenous Peoples Program within social development, social and political analysis, and social dimensions of climate change, which is also a very new thing for us. So 2 new things within the department over the past year are climate change work and the conflict, crime, and violence work. And actually, we'll be phasing out the title of community-driven development and calling it governance, which I'm not too happy about, but that's the direction they're going to go. We're still going to do community-driven development work, but the team will be called just the governance team. Okay, so I highlight community-driven development again, because that's the department that I work in, or the team that I work in, and wanted you just to note some of the things that we do within that, and I feel like that kind of also helps to segue me into the innovation piece. I think that this area of community-driven development really opens doors for us for the innovative space. We're talking about how to bring communities, local institutions into conversations to better guide their own development. So this has really been, I think, an interesting component that was added to the department. I think it's now been 3 or 4 years now. All right, so innovation, the third piece that I wanted to talk about is, again, I broke it up into the lending, broke it up into the funding schemes, mainly because when I kept thinking about how to talk about innovation, I kept kind of seeing things funded in different ways and how it gives you a little bit of flexibility one way or the other. And actually, it's a little innovative in some ways that we have a kind of a nice mixture of different funding sources for which people can identify and see how they best fit. Okay, so I start with a CDD activity, and some of you may know this KPD activity in Indonesia. It's the largest community-driven development activity that the World Bank has had, and you'll see the beneficiaries there. Now, I got that online, so don't debate me the numbers, but I just wanted really for you to see the type of work that the community-driven development program was doing and how it did have, I think, the innovation around it was the process taken in which to accomplish the things that have been noted here. Again, bank lending and grant making. Again, as you know, 95% of what the bank does is lending. And so I have challenges because I come from 15 years of working with CSOs and working at USAID, where I did a lot of grant making. But within the World Bank, lending is key, and grants have to sort of connect to lending. And I reference that only to say that though I note this as an innovative funding mechanism, it's often challenging to build the innovation into the lending mechanisms. And so when I came across some of these activities, I just wanted to share them. And one was the reintegration rehabilitation project in Sierra Leone, and how the work was done to incorporate the communities in the advancement of ensuring that ex-combatants were reintegrated into communities in that country. Okay, so the development grants facility, some of you may know, and a famous one that received this grant funding was Development Marketplace, and some of you may have applied for it, may know about it. It's, I guess, one of the better known grant-making structures within the World Bank, and it promotes innovation as its core. I mention it because they received this grant, the funds from the grants facility for a long time, and now they receive money directly from the bank's budget, so they don't even apply for this anymore. They've gotten so big. I note a program that I manage called the Social Development Civil Society Fund. I came on board to the World Bank to manage this program. It started 30 years ago, and it has had many iterations over time. It began under Wolfenson when in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, because of the issue, that wouldn't be 30 years ago, 70s, and mainly because there was an interest in trying to incorporate civil society into the conversations with the World Bank and approaching it as a corporate social responsibility kind of format. And then over time, it sort of morphed into a programmatic goal or objective. So now the objective is to increase the civic engagement of marginalized and vulnerable individuals in local developmental processes. We receive a very modest budget of $3 million a year directly from the World Bank, and we support 400 grants, small grants a year, and it is managed out of World Bank country field offices. So I've been really excited about that particular program, and I guess it's innovative for the bank because the grants are average of $4,000, and a grant to the bank is something like $5 million. So it's been an interesting, thank you, it's been an interesting road to go down with the World Bank in these small grants and how they can also have some sort of impact or results for the bank and its broader goal and mission. Again, the Development Grants Facility, some of you may know the Consultative Group to Assist the Poor, established in 1995. It receives approximately $4.5 million a year. I just wanted to note this in regards to the activities that they were doing in regards to the poor and the innovativeness for which this program has really, I think, established for itself over time. I also am mentioning these programs too for you to note and for potentially generate partnership with you all, because we're always trying to encourage that, and we need, definitely mind share as well as human resources and financial resources and all of that. So if anybody is interested in any of these particular programs, let me know and talk more about them, and there are many more. The Global Public-Private Partnership for Youth Investment was established last year. And this is a truly innovative thing for the bank. It's the first time that they've had a youth and youth entrepreneurship program, which is going to target microenterprise and research ways in which to provide funding for young people. So I'm really excited about that, and I work on this as a grants manager. And we're hoping to generate additional funds and also encourage further partnerships. Okay, so then I go to bank budget that's outside of DGF, and I note this IBRD surplus. So every year, typically, there's money that's left over from the funds that were there for lending and broader bank grants, and organizations can apply for that. So the Post-Conflict Fund, which has started in 1997, gets this type of funding. And I find them to be very innovative in the sense that they target conflict areas and try to use innovative approaches to deal with conflict. This is another one of my little babies I'm just starting up called the Multi-Donor Trust Fund for Youth Investment, which is associated with the partnership that I referenced before. And again, I think part of the innovativeness in managing the partnership is that we are trying to ensure that there are varying streams of funding mechanisms so that donors and or partners can identify the best fit for them. So in this case, there is no bank funding that goes towards it, but we are encouraging partnership and hopeful investments from donors. And so you'll see our initial donors there are United Nations Foundation and Nike Foundation. Okay, and then mixed funding sources. Everybody knows about the Vulnerability Fund, and Zelic had this call, and now there's a gazillion dollars that, the biggest concern is how is it going to be managed, what's going to happen with it. I find it innovative for the bank only because I think that they did it fast, and that's not easy. So that fast in itself for the bank, I think it's an innovation and an innovative thing. I guess the concern that the conversations that are happening right now is, okay, so they now have all of this commitment. How will they ensure that the funds will be utilized in the most efficient way possible? And then, so that was responding to, there's 3 crises out there right now. So that was one, and then the food crisis, which I just give sort of a statistic here about, the food crisis has pushed millions of people back a decade. The people are feeling that there will be civil unrest if we don't address the food response or the food crisis, and the response was through the Global Food Response Fund by the bank. So I offer the objectives here just to give you some information about that. But basically, it's a mixed fund of you'll see here, multi-donor trust funds, IBRD surplus. They're pretty much taking money from wherever they can get it to push into this, which I think is also a little innovative in regards to mixing funds, because the bank isn't really good at mixing funds because there are different mechanisms for which they use to manage those funds. So the pulling in different resources, I think, is going to be an interesting exercise for the bank in regards to its ability to manage the outputs to these new funds. All right, so I'm at the end. How many minutes? Do I have a minute? You have a minute. Oh, my God. So, okay, so challenges. I have 3 up here, and then I wrote more down as I was sitting. And taking programs to scale, a lot of people said that yesterday. We do have scalable programs clearly in our lending, but some of the other programs that we have, like the Development Grants Facility funds or sort of smaller grant making, we have challenges in which there are a lot of one-offs. So how to encourage and ensure that we are able to advance those programs and bring them to scale. Everybody talks about scale at the bank, but there doesn't seem to be as concerted an effort in regards to investing the time and putting scale through or moving scale forward. And then the challenge I find in just coming from a civil society background is moving bank minds beyond lending. I mean, again, it's 95% of the work is what they do, but how do we get people to think about the bank's role a little bit differently? In fact, when I first got to the World Bank, I had this great lunch with someone, and they said, we're 3 things. We're a bank, we lend, we're an academic institution, we have these great people that come and speak, and we are a development institution. I said, oh, wow, this is great. But the problem is the development side. So we sort of promote that as an aspect of the World Bank, but we're not as good at it as I think we purport. And part of my job is to try to help advance that and to ensure an environment for which to engage with different actors beyond lending. And then the systems are ridiculous. So for a long time, we would grant make based on lending products. So how do you give an organization a grant agreement that says I'm borrowing whatever money? So for a long time that existed, and we're really trying to push the World Bank into recognizing that we need systems that are viable for grant making, especially grant making at levels under 500,000, 50,000, and 4,000, as the case may be with Civil Society Fund. And then I was thinking about metrics. Someone was talking earlier today about metrics, and we definitely need to have appropriate metrics for the varying systems that we have. And I think that oftentimes the bank it makes an effort to develop metrics and measuring systems and then sort of blankets that to everything. And that has been a challenge. And then ensuring consistency and reviewing social indicators, bringing it back to sort of the social question and the house of social. And I don't know if you all remember the Albania case of sort of displacement of people because there was some question about the bank and its role in studying the social sides of its program. But part of what we're trying to do in our department is to ensure that those initiatives and activities go forward more productively and systematically, and that people don't consider them to be a burden. Thank you so much. I hope this has generated good conversation.